All right, welcome to another episode of A World in Tension. I'm excited about this one. We're actually going to talk about this tension between success from the world's perspective and success from God's perspective. And we have a fun guest with us today. His name is Dan LaRock. He actually wrote a book called Grandpa's Gift, which we'll get into a little bit throughout this, but that was pretty pivotal in this whole his sort of wake up call to stop chasing the world. But Dan, how are you? And introduce yourself to everyone.
Hey, Neil. It's just a pleasure to be with you. I've enjoyed listening to the podcast. I'm a Minnesota guy who now lives in South Dakota. I've been an officer and a shareholder at a large international insurance consultancy called Hub International for about 17, almost 18 years now. My wife and I have founded a mission-based horse ranch. In addition to that, about almost 8 years ago now, and I'm a person who's enjoyed a very successful career. Got a family that has certainly been a blessing to us in so many ways, and still a little tension that we'll get into a little bit later.
Well, thanks, Dan. Yeah, we definitely want to hear about it, and definitely want to talk about Rock Ranch. Rob, how are you feeling today?
The humidity is amping up here in Chattanooga, so honored to talk to you over there in South Dakota, and need to head that way. So yeah, I mean, Dan, it sounds like you've really experienced a transition of sorts, and that you feel like that transition is not just something that occurred, but is occurring. It's happening. And so and talking to you a little bit, pre-record, I really got the sense that some of your tension kind of lies in, the journey between, your success in business and what it means to truly be successful in God's economy, as opposed to the world's economy.
Absolutely, Rob. Absolutely. I can tell you that, from my perspective, I was attracted to the idea of that financial independence. I was very attracted to the idea of being able to kind of do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, both for myself and for our family. And unfortunately, I was in a position to where I was in a sales position, still am, and I was able to make some things happen with the help of a great number of people on my team that resulted in I think what the world would easily see as a very successful financial opportunity for a very long number of years. And in that space, I found that, as you're experiencing all of the things that come with that, and that could include being able to do whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do it, there was still something missing. And I couldn't quite get my finger on it. Our family was wonderful. Our marriage was incredible. We had fun very nearly everywhere we went, and yet there was still something that was not quite whole. And each time we'd achieve the next level, each time we'd take the next trip, the next private plane ride, the next world travel, no matter what it was, it wasn't whole, and that's where I found some tension lived, and I had to figure out a way what was calling me.
Well, and that's why I think this conversation is so relevant for those who are chasing all those things that everyone is. It's the American dream, right? Or whatever country you're in. It's the false narrative. So I'm excited to get into that and dive in. So you guys ready to go? Ready to jump in?
Sounds great.
Welcome to A World in Tension podcast, a place where we examine the opposing pulls and struggles of life to uncover clarity, purpose, and practical solutions. Come join us as we seek to get comfortable facing the uncomfortable. This is A World in Tension.
All right, Dan, I really have to say that that really resonates with me. Just sort of that emptiness that still exists, even in the midst of success. And I think, as I think about that, it really it reminds me of someone, even, I mean, not to say that this is what you went through, but I mean, look at someone like Tiger Woods. I mean, Tiger Woods had everything, probably billions of dollars, and anything that he ever
Right.
wanted, and yet it wasn't enough. I mean, so this idea of worldly success being fulfilling, is a lie. So, kind of bringing it back around to this book, Grandpa's Gift. It seems to me like that was an inflection point for you, where you really started to kind of see some of this old wisdom. Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, Rob, thanks. That's exactly what it was. I was 15 years old, and Grandpa had been retired, but these messages had been collected. I started to read it, but I can promise you, at 15, the last thing I was thinking about was, sermons are not for, daily digestion. Sermons are for Sundays, and barely then, right? I shelved it and tried again at 21. That might have been, I was distracted by all of things college, and I couldn't get there. And so finally, in my mid 30s, I ended up discovering it again. And it was at that time when everything was clicking for me, in the career. And as I started to re-pour into some of what Grandpa shared, I started to realize that from Ecclesiastes, there's that very, very famous, there's nothing new under the sun. All that's old will be new again. And my grandfather's topics, his wisdom, his ability to deliver some conviction and then some curiosity and some questioning throughout all of these messages really helped me kind of realize there's something deeper to chase. And we'd always been people who went to church, but a lot of times it was, I'm kind of in the back. I'm waiting for the hymn to end, hoping that we could, then to get to the sermon, and I'm going to listen a little bit, but I'm going to get distracted. And my grandfather's messages, along with a recommitment to the Bible, it was beautiful, and it was different, and the message was not the same as chasing things of the world. And all the while, those things are still going really well, but I was in a new level of conviction, and I realized that this might be something worth chasing a little harder than I had before.
When we talk about the tensions, there's a pull, right? There's a pull this way and there's a pull that way. And so in this case, we're talking about this pull towards success. And then there's this other pull telling you maybe it's more purpose here. So, and it makes you kind of restless until you surrender to the deeper truth that God's trying to get you to see. So can you talk about, and I think this connects to some of this, what's neat about the book is there's all these, I call them 2x4 moments that I think you're hit by Grandpa in a loving way. So can you talk a little bit about those tension pulls to kind of make it real to people, what you were wrestling with between those two worlds?
Yeah. And so one of the big ones for me, Neil's in a message of the God who intervenes is a quote that basically shares, what are you going to do, about Christ? And I was not necessarily thinking every day of my life about that question. And so I'm like, Grandpa, and of course I couldn't talk to him. He passed on by then. So I'm trying to reread through some of these phrases, and he's sharing, this is who Jesus was, and you either believe this or you don't. And so if you don't think God's active in your life, you need to ask yourself that question. What do you think about this? And it sort of stopped me cold. as I was thinking, well, I mean, I need to make enough money. I need to save several $1,000,000. I need to put, my 401k has got to be busted at the seams. I want to, make sure that I can have all the stuff so we can enjoy all the life we're promised. And then in that section, there's of the book, I was just kind of blown back, and I reread it like 4 times, and I realized, well, the Jesus I've read about and I've learned about didn't have anything in terms of worldly monetary areas. And what, whoa, how does that relate to me? And yet as part of the triune God, I realized there is a walk and a story and a mode of being in relationship with others that I'm missing here. I think a lot of times, with my sales brethren and my teams, we'd have great parties. We'd get together. I kind of liken it to, like, the beach scene from Top Gun, when everybody's playing on the beach and they're high-fiving and they're running around, and you're in some remote island somewhere, and it's just, again, the things you want to do whenever you want to do them. But there was rarely any real connectivity outside of "you're so cool," "oh, you're so cool," and you just, it was hollow. And so in the figure of Christ, when I got convicted on that, I thought, well, I want to learn a little bit more about this. I want to learn a little bit more about this man and his impact on the world. And so that created some tension for me, because that was definitively not the things we were talking about at work. And yet the way he interacted with people was very different than the ways I've been interacting with people, perhaps. And from that, not that I wasn't unkind, but it wasn't the same level of intellectual curiosity or emotional curiosity about people. And one of my favorite analogies that I come to with it is like the starfish analogy. If you gentlemen are familiar with that, starfish analogy is where the young man is sitting on the beach full of starfish, and he's out there throwing one of them into the ocean, and then another, but there's like 10,000 starfish that washed up, and a man comes up to him and he says, "Hey, you can't possibly save them all." And the kid says, "Yeah, but I made a difference for this one." And as I read and started getting closer through some of these messages and reading it, I realized, Christ worked in the one. And in each person, he made a difference for, whether it was a redirection of some sort within the religion that he was in of the day, or a literal miracle, or saving somebody, from an emotional high, or forgiving them. Christ worked in individual lives, and it spread like wildfire. But man, was it scary. Those are not the kind of interactions that I was at all comfortable with. I was feeling a pull between a world where I was celebrated for, hitting big numbers and doing all the things that result from that, and yet what started to become more important to me was people in need of maybe some different kind of relationship. And started with internally with family, started with then a broader family and some other friends, and with people I don't even know.
It's an interesting connection. How we try to talk about on the show is these layers of tension, and how you have to kind of probe in from the external tensions into the deeper internal tensions. And we talk about like markers and indicators that something's off. So you mentioned something about that there was something with other people that maybe you saw was off base. Like I get this image in my head of like someone who has a ton of money, and they may just be like thinking of someone, "Oh yeah, park my car because you're lesser than me," and think nothing of that sort of comment. I'm not saying that's what you did, but what I'm saying is was there some sort of external mark that you were going, how I'm interacting with people is not right, and the messages that your grandpa had that are coming from basically from Christ, that's the root of it, right? Is how is God working on you in the external tension?
the messages in the book started to make me really think that I don't want to live on top water. I need to go, if I want to see the beautiful ocean, I have to get in where the fish are, and not just sit on top. And that was a little bit scary, because where the fish were was what the world will tell you is that's what you got. Or where top water's hey, top water's awesome. You can breathe, you can live, you're safe up here. You don't have to get emotionally scarred by going too deep. You're not going to get the bends coming back up. I'm not sure how many scuba diver listeners you have, but you're not going to go so deep that you can sit on top water. Everybody, it's safe here. It's good. Everybody's cool and it's fun and the sun's always shining. And that wasn't a place that, again, where the figure of Christ was living. And I found that some really interesting real relationships, the deeper I'd go, both with people at work, and also with people in my circle, and then again people that I just was more curious about knowing. My life began to get richer. My relationship with my wife began to get richer, with my kids, and everything that mattered to me before certainly was still a part of my life, but oh my word, it was far more relational than it was worldly.
It's an interesting that you almost describe something that Neil talks about a lot, and that is that a lot of people do stop in the top water, and they don't allow those external tensions to take them down into the deeper layers. And the next kind of layer that we talk about, kind of the premise of our podcast, is the natural internal tension. So you go a little deeper into the water and you start asking some of these head and heart questions, and that next level down, was there some real fear there? Was there some, my head wants to do this, but my heart wants to do this? Were there some of those internal debates as you were going through this transformation?
Rob, that's a great question. I think for so long, I prided myself on being able to have the right answers top water, right? I knew how to fix things that were broken inside of my firm's practice areas, that resulted in more successful bottom lines for the companies we serve. And it was awesome work. And I think what I feared about when I put on my goggles and looked under the water was, do I have adequate answers for the things that I might get asked if I go a little bit below the surface? Am I interesting enough to be in a conversation that might matter a little bit more? And does my, how I'm not qualified to have these conversations. I'm just every man. Spot of the tension was, do I dare ask this question? Do I dare let them know? Do I dare say I care about you to somebody that I wouldn't have said that to? Do I dare say I want to help you through this if I can, and not have it be a surface level, like call me if you need anything, more like I'm coming over because I know that your marriage is on the rocks and I know that you don't want to lose it, and I don't know if it can be saved, but my gosh, I'd like to try to help if it could be helpful. And those kind of conversations are not the kind of conversations you're in when you're out selling the heck out of business deals and everything else. But those are the ones that started to matter to me. And it was because some of the messages that I was in reading about, both in my grandpa's books and in others, and a Lord who invites us to go into some of that relationship a little more deeply, and remember who he is, and you can be saved. You don't have to be scared. You can get into these things. And so that was my tension, Rob, was am I adequate enough to even be in these types of things? And do I have enough? And then the other side was, will I care enough? What if I don't care about what I hear, right? What if what I hear doesn't convict me? I'm scared of that. And yet we're built for that kind of compassion. And the harder exterior that I might have had for a period of time, it wasn't hard to do.
Well, I mean, you are, you're a LaRock, so it's hard to break through, right? I mean, it's a hard surface, right? But seriously, so going into that kind of the end of this reflective zone, and I do love the surface water picture. It's really good. I wish people would not stay on the surface water, but when you got in that deepest, just to kind of keep running with your analogy, when you got into the deep, deep sea, where it's the wrestling with God, and I believe that those questions start to become about, hey, what am I holding on to, or what am I controlling, versus what does God really want me to surrender? It's like once you've you know dove down far enough to just be still, to actually hear the real message going on, not these distractions that at the top layers, there's a lot more distractions. There's splashing, there's all this stuff, but when you get down deep, it's quiet, but that's where the serious conversation happens. So what did you really struggle with in all this, of like that you had to let go of control and you had to surrender to God?
I think one of the biggest areas, Neil, for my life there was, I mentioned that my wife and I founded a horse ranch. It's a mission-based horse ranch called Rock Ranch. It's located in Hills, Minnesota. And we serve children, we serve families, we serve a senior population living in assisted living centers. If you've never seen joy on the face of a 90-year-old who mounts up on a horse, I can show you some pictures, and I promise you, it'll put a smile on your face. And we have a mental health program there as well. And that the genesis came through a wrestling. I describe it with full body blows, uppercuts, left cross, right cross. My wife was doing some internal work with the Holy Spirit, and so when she came to me in 2016 and said, Dan, this is what I think I'm hearing after about 2.5 years of wrestling with it. I think I'm hearing that we need to do something with the land we have and the horses we have on it, and we need to build something very simple to start, but I don't know what's going to happen with it. God is calling us to this, God for sure calling Marie. Can I get on this too, Lord? And the answer, Neil, was go. And I said to my wife that day, I can still remember it, Marie, if you are having these kinds of wrestlings, if this is something that's happening internally within you, and you have just trusted me with this, knowing that it sounds outlandish because of what we both have, going on. If you're hearing this, then we have to answer that call. And so that moment in 2016, and we fast forward now to 2023, the organization is serving 3,000 plus people a year. We served 50 in year one. We are helping people get back to good from really difficult situations through our mental health program. Marie asked me the question, but it might as well have been God. And will you go? Will you serve? And we threw everything into that from our hearts and minds. It's worked really well for us as a couple, because my wife is able to design all the really neat things people come for, and the things I've learned in business over multiple years have allowed us to keep an entity there, growing, thriving, and so I'm the business side and the marketing side, and she's the really cool stuff.
I think that's a good setup for, you kind of already started to go there, which is, as we're reflecting in, how do we go out to kind of, the term I like is to use is to be agents of redemption in this world. So, and the Rock Ranch that's kind of a cool thing, that it wasn't just a surrender of the heart. It was also like, and go do this thing, right? Which does cool things. So just kind of coming back out on that, like, to be, God uses tension to draw us to him and to reflect, but then he wants us to do something, right? How do you think this journey and kind of, and we should also say, I think your journey with this is kind of at least over a 12-year period from what I recall, right? With wrestling with the messages from your grandpa. And by the way, the messages from the grandpa came from like the 1960s. They were over-air broadcast, kind of little snippets. And that's how he's captured it in the book. So they kind of, it's like little mini sermonettes, and they hit you. So over that, I just want to, tell the listener that this was a process. It wasn't just like overnight.
Right. I'm pretty thick-headed, Neil. So the Lord has to do a lot of knocking before I can really understand.
I was going to ask that, Dan. Were there times in the journey where you felt like there were walls that you hit, or even trails that took you back in the wrong direction? You had to kind of fight through. I mean, or was it just more of a continuous, gradual moving in the same direction?
Yeah, I think for sure, Rob, on that walk, it was for a while I was trying to be both and. Like I can be this successful sales executive and all the things that come with that life. If I'm hungover, it used to be a rite of passage, let's say. Like, hey, LaRock, you were really after it last night, right? You got after it pretty good. Well, those moments started to like as I was walking, holding hands, and then running a little faster, but with my walk with Christ, I'd find the moments that I'd get myself into those situations really uninspired me. like not from a standpoint that I want off of my walk with Christ. I want off of this train, because this is not cool. There's nothing that lives at the bottom of my next drink that is going to at all be revelatory to me. But if I get up and I read another verse inside of Proverbs or something biblically, I'm going to probably be a little bit more inspired. And so those things in those years were pulling on me, right? I might have been imbibing in certain things of the world, but they were getting fewer and fewer and fewer, because my conviction, and it wasn't, I wouldn't call it guilt, although I mean, once in a while I could call it guilt, but it was more like I would just wake up, what are you doing? You're wasting time. Stop wasting time. Get back with me and let's go. It just became less interesting to me, and God became far more interesting, mysterious and interesting.
To me, there's a difference between conviction and shame, right? Like shame is that comes from the enemy of like beating you up, making you feel worthless, whereas conviction is like, hey, you really are, I love you, like my ways are actually beneficial to you too. Like they don't, it's when you're pursuing my glory, it's actually provides you benefit too, because I designed you to work in this way. But what would you tell someone who's like a LaRock from, they're 15, 20 years behind you or whatever age they are, and they're saying, nah, I still want the Lamborghini. That's a great story, but what would you tell them?
The success can yield just about anything you want financially. The success can get you anywhere you want to go, but you can chase this entire world. You can chase all over, and at the end of the day, your relationships are what's going to matter more, and you will find the richness that lives inside of your soul when you help someone in a problem that doesn't know the answers. And I'm not talking about a problem like I can't get a car loan. I'm talking about a problem that's like soul clenching problem. And you're going to find that the payment for that intrinsically, and the rewards that in the way I believe, the rewards that come from a job well done, good and faithful servant, are going to be far exceeding. That's where the good stuff lives. That's where the energy, that's where the feelings of self-worth, that's where giving versus taking. It's a simple thing to say, but there is a cataclysmic shift when somebody looks at you and says, I don't know what I would have done without you. You helped me get through something. It's better than any jet ride I ever took to any remote destination for any length of time.
I think that's a great message, Dan. And hopefully it strikes someone. And honestly, I mean, the wise person doesn't have to get to that.
Right.
You can be at a lower level chasing some, you're this program manager and you're thinking about being this executive VP someday. You can start thinking about it then. Look at what
Right.
those people are putting in. Be wise. Look. And I'm not saying that's a bad, that's not the right path. I'm saying if that's your ambition, if that's the only thing that you care about, then you're going to be off. So I would also encourage those to be wise where they're at. I think that's part of the trap, right? Well, I don't really know until I get there. Well,
Right.
Don't fall for that trap, right?
That's exactly what I was kind of wondering, is how do you convince someone who's not been there that being there isn't the best thing? When you were a kid, at least when I was a kid, I'd hear testimony, kids who came to Christ, out of, the drug scene or the party scene, and, their transformation was, amazing, like their pre-Christ life and their post-Christ life were, a huge contrast, but mine was more gradual and slow. And, it's just kind of, it's an interesting thing, Neil, to mention that, because there is a tension there as well, as before you actually buy into the lie that success is going to bring you happiness.
You feel good about accomplishing that which you set out to do, but when you realize at the end of that, there's going to be a hole, there's going to be a hollow, there's going to be something that something else needs to fill, and it won't be the next deal, and it won't be the next massive amount of money, and it won't be the next that won't do it, and it won't be what it's going to be is finding a way to get into a different kind of relationship with the people who matter to you most, in the light of Christ's invitation to real relationship with people. And as I read about him, and if I read and spend time in the Gospels, certainly, things like the Beatitudes are amazing words for people to think about in groups, right? We have an opportunity to make our human connectedness glorious. And when we choose it, when we choose to get into some of those things, those will be the memories that sustain us. Those will be the best memories. The real work by a closer walk with He. I just love it. I just love it.
Well, Dan, this has been a great conversation. Where can people learn more about, if they want to look at your book or even Rock Ranch? I want to visit Rock Ranch. It looks like a cool place to, you know what? I didn't tell you this, Dan, but I have this strange desire to, and I don't horse ride. Okay. So this is maybe dangerous, but like, I actually want to get on a horse once I know what I'm doing a little bit and just go like, boom, like however fast horses go. Like I want to go for it. And people are like, you're crazy. You would kill yourself. But so is that even possible? Because I would love to experience that once.
Well, Neil, being that insurance is my work, liability and risk are hot topics in my mind on a pretty regular basis. We'd have to have quite a waiver release for a virgin horseman. We do have a thoroughbred, an off-the-track thoroughbred. His name is Benny, and he is lightning fast. But I'm not sure. I would rather get you in the virtual reality goggles and see if we can see how that feels first. Because I'll tell you this, we could definitely get you on a horse, and then we'll see if you still want to do that. After you get it, we'll get you into a trot and see see if the blazing feels like something you want to try later.
No, my wife would be happy with your answer because it's probably a smarter one than what I want to pursue. But how can they find you at Rock Ranch or with your book?
You bet. So a couple ways to get a hold of me. I would love for any of your listeners to connect with me. I try to keep up on LinkedIn and other social medias. I'm pretty active on Facebook as well. But Rock Ranch has a website called riderockranch.org. And if you'd like more information about the book, grandpasgiftbook.com. Book's available on Amazon. So social media, a couple different websites, and would love to engage with any of your listeners if they've got something they want to talk about following this.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Dan, to get to know you a little bit better, and thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of A World in Tension.